I hope that through today's topic, Mary and I can help those of you in the Pride universe maybe keep that trend going downward, right? So that it's not going to take 10 years to cultivate a donor to their first major gift. We can keep chipping away at that timeline sooner. Before I dig into the slides and sort of the agenda for this session, I just wanted to share, I came across this ironically a couple weeks ago on LinkedIn, and it's from the Varga group, so I'll give them some credit. They pointed out that we as fundraisers have been taught that fundraising is about getting our message across. It's about inspiring people with our metrics, sharing our compelling stories, talking about our work in meaningful and impactful ways, and crafting the perfect ask. But what if donor cultivation, especially to that major gift, that best gift they can give us, is really more about listening generously to people? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. How can we listen generously? How can we use advanced active listening techniques and what some of the science behind that is so that we can really discover why our mission speaks to this person? What are they passionate about? And how can we marry those two together in a way that's going to compel them to make action in a big, big way? Trish, if you'll go on to the next slide, just a quick overview of sort of the agenda for today's session as we talk through some tips and details about what advanced listening is. All right, on to the next one. Now, Mary and I had a good laugh. This image is probably going to date us and some of our participants today. If you immediately recognize it, throw it in the chat. Tell me what movie this is from. I see Sterling, her wheels are turning. This is, I'll tell you about the picture in a minute. But the first key, what is listening? What is listening? Like, what are the parts of listening? When we are in interpersonal communications, the person speaking is sending encoded messages, right? We, as the receiver, are actively working to kind of listen to what they're saying, but also to listen to what they're not saying. We're trying to decode that message and the messages that are implied in their conversation. It's a lot of work on our brains, especially when we're just getting to know someone. We don't know some of the idiosyncrasies. And Sterling for the win. Yes, this is the image where Ralphie from A Christmas Story gets his decoder pin. I think it was like from a special spy uh commercial, and he is working to decode the message from a Little Orphan Annie radio broadcast. At the end of the day, he says Sterling loves winning. Yes, you do. He gets through it and he decodes the message from this radio broadcast and basically comes out with the conclusion that this is a crummy commercial. He doesn't really love the decoder pin. He doesn't really love, like, basically it's an ad, right? They tricked a kid into watching an ad, listening to an ad, and then decoding their advertising communication. Um, he decides it's crummy. And I think sometimes our decoding skills, especially in conversations with major gift prospects, are pretty crummy, right? Trish, you can go on to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the dimensions of listening. When we are listening to a major gift prospect, when we're listening to a colleague, to a manager, we have to go through all of these very detailed steps in order to actually decode the message that they are trying to send to us. So, sensing is the physical receipt of the message. This is the most basic aspect, right? Did I hear them? Did I observe nonverbal cues? Was there inflection used in the delivery? Was there certain body language or facial expression? This is why we always encourage a face-to-face or at least a video conversation when you're making an ask to a major gift prospect, especially in cultivation. Learning their body language, decoding the way that they talk about certain topics. When you're giving a tour of your facility or your organization, I always tell clients, like, watch where they light up, right? See where they get excited about your organization or your mission. You're looking for clues, even beyond the words that they're saying, that are going to tell you, where do I need to put the emphasis when I craft the perfect ask for this prospect. Um, as you are looking and sensing and listening, you are observing nonverbal cues, and you're also looking for the messages that the speaker is not sending, right? You're trying to pick up on the obvious and the less obvious. Processing. This is a lot of the work on us, right? Mentally processing and assigning meaning to the information that we've observed. We're taking the things in during sensing, and then our brain, our heart, our minds about the work, we are processing all of the things that we've gathered and picked up on during sensing, right? This is hugely important before we respond. Sending information back to the speaker indicates that their message has been received. So a lot of times, Jake or others on our team will say, kind of say it back to your prospect. Say it back and make sure that you heard what they said, and make sure that they said what they really meant, right? So responding to them in a way that confirms what you heard, what you saw, what you didn't hear, again, those nonverbal cues as well, helps both of you to be sure that you're decoding properly and that you're speaking in the same way about their goals, their preferences, their likes and dislikes. As you work through this, as you implement these tips and tricks that we'll talk through today, it will become more natural. But it is work. That's why they call it advanced listening, right? This isn't always natural to us. And again, for years, we as fundraisers have been taught it's about our message, it's about our pitch, it's about how we ask for what we need. But it starts with listening. So let's dive on a little bit deeper and talk about the levels of listening. So, marginal listening is pretty much what it sounds like. It's hearing the words, but we're easily distracted. I think this often happens today. There's so much technology. There are so many, like it's great if you can get into a prospective donor's office if it's a C-suite person and the only way you can see them is to talk your way into 20 minutes at their office. The downside is 20 minutes at their office is going to result in like 5 or 10 minutes of solid conversation at times, right? They're busy. They're going to get interrupted. Somebody's going to pop in and need to ask them to sign something or approve something. So they're marginally listening, right? They're hearing your words. They're talking back to you. You're hearing their words, but you're also observing their space and observing how they operate in their workspace. It is likely to be a flawed intake of information when we are only marginally listening. Evaluative listening is when we, as the listener, we're picking up on the words that are being said. We might be missing the nonverbals. We might be missing some of the more subtle verbal cues. This commonly happens on a phone call because you don't get that added benefit of facial expression. You don't get to see their body language as they're taking the call. I do think that it's interesting on a phone call, you can usually tell if someone's smiling while they're talking to you, right? There's a little lilt in their voice. You can generally pick up if someone's angry or happy or distracted. That might come across. But in a face-to-face scenario, even a video call like this, you have the opportunity to pick up on more subtle verbal cues. In evaluative listening, you're sometimes, it can lead to poor responses, right? So maybe the listener is only focused on the actual literal meaning of the words that are being said, the words that I'm hearing, but I'm not taking in the full scope of the communication that's being shared with me through those more subtle cues. Lastly, active listening. Active listening is what we aspire to. It's what we want to be doing with each and every one of our donor interactions. That is when the listener receives, correctly processes, and appropriately responds to the message the speaker is conveying. That's our goal, and that's where we want to get to. So we're going to take a quick break from all this like science and definition, and we're going to play a quick game. Sterling, there will be prizes to be determined because, like, I don't know, Jake, what are we going to throw people? We will
Candy.
give prizes though. Okay, and I warned Mary, this is going to test my very limited musical abilities. Okay, so we're going to play the clapping game. I'm going to go first. I'm going to clap out a tune, and we're going to see if any of you can actively listen and interpret what tune I am clapping out. And this is added pressure because, you know, Jake is a professional musician. And so, like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be so bad. Okay, are we ready? Here goes my song. I'm only clapping. Does anybody have any idea what song I just clapped? I can do it again.
So the crazy thing is, it's actually like canceling out your clapping. The mic won't. The software is too smart.
The software is too smart. It won't. Okay, let's see if I can try it again. I can hum it for sure. Jake, do you have a guess or an audio tip? You don't get the prizes though.
Shut up, Jake. He just watched the hands and knew. That's a cheating.
Cheating.
I got it. I got it.
Who's that? Who said that?
Ken.
Ken, do you know what song I was clapping?
I think it was Freebird.
I like your head, but no. I like where your brain goes. I can try it one more time, or anybody else can just take a bold guess because it's still going to be terrible. Jake beat me to it. Yes, it was in fact Jingle Bells, because that's like all I could come up with and reasonably get out probably on an accurate rhythm. All right, Mary,
Okay,
it's
my
your
turn. My turn. My turn. Mine may be harder. All right.
Mary, we need to be able to see you. We need to switch the spotlight because the sound probably won't work.
Can y'all see me? Okay.
Yeah, no.
Anybody?
That's tough without sound.
It really is. Yeah. I promise it's not like blister in the sun. Any guesses? Anybody want to guess?
way more beats.
Okay, Sterling says do it one more time.
This does feel like it's some type of exercise in like rhythm percussion stuff. And it feels like if Jake doesn't get it, then no one will get it. So
Jake, guesses? Anybody? Come on. No guesses? Seriously? Okay, Jake's stumped. All right.
Yeah, I didn't
Obviously,
get it.
we have no Bruce Springsteen fans in the house. That was the opening line to Born to Run. In the day we sweat it out on the streets. Nobody? No clue. Yeah. Okay. Tune into the classic rock station, people. So, all right. So that game that we just played is actually a loose replication of a study done at Stanford in 1990 where people did exactly what we just did. One person tapped out a song and the other person had to guess it. But what they did that we didn't do, oh, Trish, you can unhighlight me and put slides back up if you haven't yet. What we didn't do was we didn't ask the clapper to estimate the likelihood that the listeners would be able to guess their song. So whenever they did this study at Stanford, the clappers actually guessed that the listeners would guess the song 50% of the time. And then, but in the actuality, whenever the listeners guessed, they were only right like 2.5% of the time. So, like, what kind of information would have made you a better guesser? Just shout it out or put it in the chat. Like, anybody, what would have made you a better guesser to guess what Jenna and I, what we were clapping? Pitch? Okay, yeah, like melody would have helped. Genre, okay. like knowing maybe, but yeah, better sound. We had no idea that this would not pick up claps. Genre is big, yeah. So like kind of knowing what kind of music maybe we listen, knowing our taste, yeah, knowing what kind of music we listen to. So one of the things that this whole study uncovered is this idea of the curse of knowledge. This is actually from a book by Chip and Dan Heath. And the idea of the curse of knowledge is that we go into conversations with all of this knowledge. We know our organization. We know what it needs. We know what a gift could accomplish. We know how far we are to goal for the year. And we know all of these things. It's hard for us to imagine that our prospective donor doesn't know these things. Similarly, our donors know their personal financial situation. They know if they have existing commitments, either to philanthropy or to other things. They know what would add meaning to their life. They know if giving is even an activity that adds meaning to their life. They know whether they have a personal connection to your cause or not, and they can't imagine you not knowing this. So this whole clapping game thing kind of got me thinking, like, are they clapping and we just aren't picking up on their song? So like, how can we pick up on their clapping better and pick up on their clapping more quickly before they have to, God forbid, sing in front of all these people? So next slide, Trish, please. So that's where we get into these advanced listening types. And there's lots of, just a quick swipe at the academic literature, I came up with all these different types of advanced listening. The good folks in academia have made this really complex. And like these different types of advanced active listening have different settings, and each one of them has different skills. Like therapeutic listening is for a counseling or mental health situation. Appreciative listening is what you do whenever you go to like a live music performance. But there was really only one that made a whole lot of sense for the work that we do. Next slide, please, Trish. And that's this concept of active empathetic listening. And back in 1999, two researchers, Lucette Comer and Tanya Drollinger, actually put a framework around the idea of active empathetic listening. Now, their framework is not specific to philanthropy or like the major gift setting. Theirs was about selling success. And if you've got a public library with digital resources, I'd actually recommend looking this paper up. It's a pretty good read and has some pretty interesting information in it. But as I was reading it, whenever I dug into the literature, I noticed whenever they were going through the different steps of the sales process, there's a whole lot of parallels to what I've experienced as a gift officer. I won't go into exactly how all of these line up, but you see that like we both get to the point where there's some sort of sales presentation, which seems pretty similar to the ask, or you're dealing with objection handling, which is really the same for us too, whenever we're getting to the point of a person committing to making a gift. Trish, if you would, next slide. And as I read through this paper, I noticed two things that they really emphasized. One was that successful salespeople were really great at initially building rapport. And then as they went through all those other steps, they kept asking questions to discover things about the person that they were trying to close the sale with. Now, these two skills combined to build out a whole series of behaviors that they called active empathetic listening. Next slide, please, Trish. Now, whenever they were rapport building, they were not trying to get the person to reveal really deep information about themselves. Like rapport building is just about getting the person to be willing to talk to you and to think positively of you. A a good friend of mine who is very experienced in major gifts had an epiphany late in her career about how to start off talking with people that she didn't know. She had, up to that point, she was very experienced, very knowledgeable. Up to that point, though, she had always viewed talking about the weather as something that only boring people do. She was like, the weather is just so banal. And late in her career, she realized that everybody experiences the weather. It's okay to talk about the weather. It's okay to kick off a conversation by talking about the weather, even if the weather's not pleasant, even if it's hot as blazes, even if it's like it is where I am right now, where it's steamy outside and you feel like you're mildewing as soon as you step out on your front porch. It's okay to talk about the weather. Now, the second thing is actually a pretty well-researched trick that you may want to keep in your back pocket. Whenever you're building rapport with a person, one of the ways that they immediately feel connected to you is if you repeat just their last 3 words and follow that with a question. So that may be like, last 3 important words, and then the question, really? Or, and then what? It doesn't have to be a long question. You just want to pick up on their last 3 important words. Now, I actually caught myself doing this earlier this week with someone whom I have great rapport with. It's a friend of mine, and she has just had a baby. And so she and her partner are reshuffling their household duties. And she was telling me about that she had come home and had found that the dishwasher was full of clean dishes. And I have to admit, I was kind of spacing out while she was telling me this story because I was fixing dinner at the same time. But then I keyed in on the last 3 words she had said. She said, and then I opened the dishwasher and my cast iron skillet was in the dishwasher. And you have to understand, if anybody out there owns cast iron, putting it in the dishwasher might be the cardinal sin. And what I said to her, and I caught myself doing this, was, in the dishwasher? Really? And because I was getting ready to do this presentation, I was like, look at me, rapport building. Next slide, please, Trish. So the other piece of that active empathetic listening is this concept of empathetic questioning. And scientists will separate 2 different ideas that sound very similar: perspective taking versus perspective getting. Now, perspective taking is very closely akin to that old adage of, you can't understand somebody until you walk a mile in their shoes. There's an article from Harvard Business Review cited at the bottom of this slide, and the person who wrote it made a really good point in that article. They said, if you were to get this other person's shoes and walk a mile in them, number one, they probably wouldn't fit you. And then you would only know at the end of that mile how you felt after walking a mile in their shoes. Their shoes won't fit you. Their story probably won't fit you either. Scientists contrast this with perspective getting, which actually means actively requesting additional information and trying to eliminate your own thoughts, your own experiences, and your own biases from the way that you're taking that information in. One way of doing this is a process called looping. And looping, this kind of goes back to what Jenna was saying about repeating the person's words back to them. Looping is where, whenever a person's telling you their story, you repeat it back to them, not robotically, but as closely as you can to the words that they actually used. And then you'll follow it with another question along the lines of, is that right? If you're trying to clarify something, you might actually follow that looping behavior with the question, what else am I missing? Or what else is there to know? These sorts of behaviors will reinforce that rapport that you started out building with those 3 words and the really. And it will help you understand more about their perspective as opposed to just trying to put yourself in their place. Next slide, please, Trish. So with that, we'd like to open the floor up to any questions that you might have about the stuff that we've been talking about.
Thank you so much, Mary, and everyone for playing along with our even more challenging clapping game today. If you have more questions about this topic or anything going on at Pride, if you're not a current Pride client, I encourage you to take your QR scanner and see if you can go ahead and book a 30-minute call with a member of our team to sort of talk through your needs as an organization and the ways that we can serve those needs. For the